Hello and welcome to our Park Life Sport Six Nations special with me, Sean Watts.
And me, Sam Law.
On the show today, we'll be going back to where it all started for England winger Johnny May and talking about the Women's Six Nations as well.
We'll also be visiting Gloucester to see how excited you guys are for the start of the tournament, and we went down to local rugby club Hucklecote as well.
But first, let me introduce our special guest, world-renowned sports commentator Nick Mullins, who's with our rugby expert Carl Inez.
Thank you, Sean. Nick and I will be discussing the possible Six Nations squads, the new tackle laws, the trolling of a bonus point system, and of course, who we think will come out on top.
Now, staying with England, Carl, Nick, talk us through how last year's Grand Slam winners could line up in the opening game and their competition in the form of Ireland and Scotland.
Thank you, Sean. Nice opening question for you, Nick. Do you think in the year with the Lions tour that the Six Nations can still hold the sort of reputation that it has as being the pinnacle tournament for Northern Hemisphere rugby?
I think it is. Well, it's certainly the pinnacle tournament for those six teams in it. It's also the tournament that I think we all grew up with. It was, whether we played or not, it was probably the first rugby that we saw on the telly, and we'll all have our own memories of it. So yeah, the Six Nations, because of what it means personally and the wider history, it's been going on for over 100 years, is still the big one. It's still the one that gets the juices going, because it still pitches England against Wales and Scotland against Ireland, and it's so much about the rivalries that we can really enjoy at this time of the year.
If we move on to England, obviously there's been the stories recently of the injury crisis that has kind of plagued the team, especially in the pack. You're going to need players like your Mara Tojes and your Owen Farrells to really step up for this tournament, aren't you?
Yeah, they've not made it any easier for Eddie Jones. Defending Six Nations champions, they along with Ireland are the form side in the Northern Hemisphere going into the Six Nations. But yeah, they've lost a couple of props in Mako Vunipola and Joe Marler. Chris Robshaw isn't well. James Haskell, there are still questions about his fitness in the backs. Manu Tuolangi not well. For one or two other international teams, that would be a major full-blown crisis. Not so much for England, because they've got such good young players coming through, like Mara Itoje, that they can thankfully cover those losses.
As if it wasn't difficult enough with the injury crisis, they've also got to travel to Cardiff and Dublin for this year.
And there's the rub, because if they are going to not just win the Grand Slam, but therefore in the process break New Zealand's world record for consecutive Test wins at a Tier 1 level, then they've got the toughest of roads to travel. They have to go to Cardiff and they have to go to Dublin, and if they are Grand Slam champions come April, they'd have done it the hard way.
Talking of the All Blacks record, obviously the team that broke that record, Ireland, they themselves have had a very good autumn and summer series. You've got obviously they beat New Zealand, they beat South Africa in the summer. Do you think they pose a very significant threat to England?
Oh, absolutely. And they were just brilliant in November. They'd never beaten New Zealand in over 100 years worth of giving it a go. They took the game to Chicago, to Soldier Field. Such an emotional moment because of Anthony Foley's death a week or so before. But they were outstanding, and they didn't just beat New Zealand. They beat them well. They took them on up front, and they took their chances behind the pack as well. And if they can recreate that kind of form, then they will be a real threat for the Six Nations. They're playing with so much confidence at the moment.
A key man for them, obviously the guy behind us here, CJ Stanley, he's having an unbelievable season.
He is, yeah. There are one or two who might question whether he ought to be playing for Ireland. He was brought up in South Africa. He's got a broad South African accent, but he loves Ireland. Ireland was the country that gave him his opportunity. The laws at the moment mean that after 3 years you qualify to play for that country, and he's been a fabulous addition. He made his debut for Ireland in the Six Nations last season, and he just adds a real oomph in that back row for Joe Schmidt's team.
Another man in form, obviously Scotland, their fly half Finn Russell playing well for Glasgow. Do you think Scotland with him playing could be a dark horse this year?
Well, I think what's interesting about Scotland, and they're about to change management. This is Vern Cotter's last Six Nations before Gregor Townsend takes over. Gregor Townsend currently the Glasgow coach, and really the basis of Scotland's team, particularly amongst the backs, will be based on that Glasgow team who are going so well in Europe. And Finn Russell is the kingmaker. He's the kingpin. He will drive them around. He's an ambitious young player, plays on the gain line, tests defences, brilliant passing, great game management, wonderful kicking. And if Scotland are to tick, he'll be the guy winding the clock.
Yeah, you got Russell, players like Stuart Hogg and Johnny Gray. They'll also be pushing for a Lions shirt this summer.
Well, you'd hope so. I'm not sure how many Scotland players at the moment would be in our Lions squad. Certainly those three. But the wonderful thing about the Six Nations, from a Scottish point of view, is that it's an opportunity for them to say, hang on a minute, Warren Gatland, you might not have thought about me. but here's what I've just done against an Ireland, against a Wales or against an England, and maybe we'll see some of those names that we're not thinking about at the moment pushing themselves towards line selection.
And quickly, to finish off, a word for Vern Cotter. It's his last sort of Six Nations in charge before Gregor Townsend takes over in the summer.
It is, and I like what Vern has done with Scotland. He's put in a structure, he's brought back some confidence, and maybe the results aren't quite showing it at the moment, but there's a feel-good factor within that team, and when Vern does go to Montpellier, when Gregor Townsend takes over, he'll leave a nation in pretty decent shape.
Thank you, Nick. Back to Sean and Sam.
Thanks, guys. We'll check back with the boys later on. Now, although plenty of focus has been on the men's tournament, the women's competition is also going on. Carl Inez went to speak to some of the England squad about the upcoming tournament and the World Cup later this year.
The 2017 Six Nations is just around the corner, and all the women's national sides will be looking to gain some momentum heading into this year's World Cup. Worcester Valkyries and England player Rochelle Clark thinks that the England side are more than up for the challenge.
Training's going really well, so we've been working on lots of our unit skills and taking it hopefully into the games, and we really want to assert ourselves for the Six Nations leading into the World Cup. We're being a professional means you can actually rest when you're supposed to rest rather than go to work, and we're able to spend a lot of time on our basics, which is really good. So hopefully we'll, in 8 months' time, be the finished product.
Fellow England international Lydia Thompson knows that this tournament is a huge chance to prove herself ahead of the World Cup defence.
This is what you train on those dark, horrible nights for, these sort of seasons where you've got an amazing tour to look forward to and then a World Cup at the end of it. I mean, being world champions at the moment from last World Cup, we've got a lot of expectations on our shoulders, and I think that will just give us that bit more push to go forward.
Gloucestershire-based Hartpury College is widely known as a centre of excellence for both men's and women's rugby, with notable alumni including Johnny May, Dan Norton and Natasha Hunt. Susie Appleby, who is the current head coach of the Hartpury women's side and a part of the England setup, admits the recent professional contracts awarded to some England players give them a significant advantage.
The full-time contracts for the 15s, I've literally just started last week, so they are absolutely buzzing. So from their head, the lead coach, Scott Beamond, he was just like, it's so fantastic to be able to do those little skills that they just haven't had time to do. So it's getting time to train properly together, but also to have the rest and recovery, eat properly, etc., without that full-time job.
But despite the benefit of the full-time training, Appleby knows that the Six Nations is far from in the bag.
Every nation within Europe is getting stronger and stronger. France are always serious contenders for any competition they're in. They're very physical, they have great skills, they have great attitude as well. They are in a similar position to us, so some of them are kind of full-time athletes. Ireland are in a really good position, so they're training a lot together. I'm not sure about their full-time status. However, they're a really good side. So alongside us getting better and better, these sides are getting better and better, and like I said, in 8 months' time, it's going to be a massive competition, and to be honest, the cup could go anywhere, really.
It's an exciting time for England women's rugby. With the help of athletes like Rochelle Clark and Lydia Thompson, and the help of coaches like Susie Appleby, it's a good chance for England women to win the Six Nations for the first time in 2 years, and a good chance for all the women to put a big performance on the big stage and push on to the World Cup this August in Ireland. Carl Innes, Park Live Sport. And current World Cup holders England kick off their Six Nations campaign against France, who won the tournament last year, on February the 4th. And so, Nick, the professional contracts introduced for the 15s players recently, do you think that'll make a big impact for the England side?
I'd imagine it will. They brought them in before the Rio Olympics for the Sevens team, and it just means that they can concentrate fully on being full-time athletes, top-level athletes. They don't have to worry about doing whatever jobs they were doing and fitting it in alongside the rugby. And now the 50 in the sides team have that. They rightly concentrated on the sevens ahead of the Olympics, but it's time to refocus on the 15s and to try and launch a bid to hold on to the World Cup, which is also this year.
Yeah, one of their key players, Sarah Hunter, she was recently awarded with the World Player of the Year. Do you think she's going to be essential for England if they're going to succeed?
Well, I think as importantly to her role on the pitch with England, it's her wider role, and it's providing heroines for people like my two teenage daughters who are mildly interested in rugby at the moment, but will be more interested if people like Sarah Hunter start to get a little bit more publicity, start to become recognised figures in a way that maybe Katie McLean was a couple of years back. So I think Sarah, who is a brilliant role model, has a a big future within the game and can really help sell what is actually the biggest growing part of rugby in this country at the moment, the women's game.
Yeah, just to finish off, obviously England current World Cup holders. The World Cup's in August in Ireland. Do you think they'll be looking that far ahead yet, or do you think they'll be focusing on this entirely?
They'll be focusing on the Six Nations, but they'll certainly have their eye on the World Cup. France will be big threats. Ireland will be as well, but the team they're all going to have to beat in New Zealand. They'll be the favourites going into the tournament.
Thank you again, Nick. And we'll be back with you in a few minutes to round off the final 3 teams for the Six Nations.
Thanks again, guys. We'll be back with you shortly. But first, local Gloucestershire side Hucklecote continued their season with an impressive 25-10 win over Frampton Cotterell on Saturday. We sent Will Freeman down to the match to see how the excitement for the Six Nations is building amongst grassroots teams and players.
In front of a strong crowd on Saturday, Hucklecote showcased their best rugby to beat their South Gloucestershire rivals Frampton Cotterell. The match began with a minute's silence to remember the mother of a player who had died in a car crash in Oxfordshire earlier in the week. On the pitch, Hucklecote were devastating on the counter-attack and ran in 3 first-half tries to put themselves in a commanding position at the break. Flanker Patrick Hanslow played a crucial part in 2 of the tries.
Excellent win for us. We haven't played since before Christmas, I think about 4 weeks. So to come back, especially at home, we haven't played together, we only have 2 training sessions. So to come out and be able to get 5 points at home, bonus point win, was a great performance. It wasn't probably our best performance, but we still got the win, which is the main thing.
Frampton had their moments and their dominant scrum yielded 2 tries. However, they were unable to cope with the dynamism of the hosts' backline. Brad Harris secured a bonus point win with a try straight after the break. Head coach Andy Phillips spoke of his delight after the match.
It's been a month off playing, delighted with the win and especially get 5 points, but more importantly it was a tough game. Frampton were really strong up front, and it's good to have a really honest game in sticky conditions, which will sort of bode us well for the rest of the season hopefully.
Hucklecote are well known for having been a childhood club of Wales international and Grand Slam winner Alex Cuthbert. Phillips spoke with me about one of his former charges and what he's expecting from the tournament.
I know Alex well. Alex is a friend of a friend, and he actually played for me in my school team in a Sevens tournament, and I know unfortunately been dropped for this weekend. But Six Nations is massive influence on the younger generation come through. I remember watching it, obviously when it was in Six Nations with my father down in Wales, and it's got that bite to it that's probably got as much interest in it, if not more, than the World Cup. And I think that even though England have got so many injuries, I think they're a team to beat. Now I'm a little bit concerned as a Welshman. We might end up on the bottom this year, but we'll wait and see.
This playing field on the outskirts of Gloucester may look a far cry from Twickenham or the Millennium Stadium, but it's from places like these that some of the game's greats have come from. And who knows, maybe one of these players will grace the game's biggest stage one day. Will Freeman, Park Life Sport.
And now we cross back to Carl and Nick again to talk through the remaining 3 countries, Wales, Italy and France. Do you see any of that trio causing an upset and going on to win it, guys?
Nick, quick answer for that one?
I do, yes.
Oh, you do?
I think probably the first 2. I suspect we might be able to rule Italy out of that equation, but certainly France and Wales will be one of those teams thinking that they can win it at the end of it all.
Yeah, well, obviously for Wales, they've got no Warren Gatland this year. He's away on sabbatical for the Lions tour. Rob Howley taking charge. Do you think that'll make a big difference?
Well, I think it's a real opportunity for Rob Howley to show that he's a number 1. He spent a lot of time over the last decade being Warren Gatland's number 2. Yeah. We'll see what difference it makes to the way they play. I suspect not a great deal. They'll still play the way that Warren Gatland has set them up to play. They'll be playing through a big, imposing pack, using the ball when they can. But yeah, I'm fascinated to see how Rob Howley goes. The autumn wasn't great, so room for improvement in the Six Nations.
Obviously, last week Sam Warburton stepped down as captain for Wales. Do you think Alan Wynne-Jones is probably the favourite to replace him? Well,
I've thought for a while actually, and there were 1 or 2 who were sniggering when I first mentioned it, that actually Alan Wynne might be my Lions captain. I think he's just such an imposing figure. He's bright, he's intelligent. There's no questioning that he's good enough. If Alan Wynne-Jones is good enough to start for the Lions, he'd be my captain. And he's therefore the Wales captain in my mind.
Obviously, the guy behind us, Ross Moriarty, playing very well for Gloucester and for Wales in the autumn. You've got players like Thomas Young, Dan Baker from Ospreys. Wales have an embarrassment of riches in the back row.
They do, and Ross Moriarty's improvement over the last couple of seasons has been one of the real success stories. I think he was Wales Player of the Autumn in those games. He was one of the rare bright lights in an otherwise fairly gloomy November for them. It's a real sign of the quality that Rob Howley has to pick on in the back row, though, that I don't think that Thomas Young is going to make the squad. There are lots of those up the road at Wasps, his dad included, who think he's very much test match quality these days. He's been brilliant the last couple of months, but I'd be surprised to see him in the Six Nations squad when it's named tomorrow.
And obviously England beat Wales last year in the tournament and in a friendly match in the summer. I'm sure they'll be keen to get revenge.
Yes, that will be an understatement. And we said a little earlier that for England to win the Grand Slam, they're going to have to go the tough, rocky road, and the first really big hurdle will be in Cardiff against Wales.
If we move on to Italy, obviously they've recently had a new coaching setup. Conor O'Shea coming from Harlequins, Mike Catt as well. Do you think they've got any chance of getting a win this year?
Well, that's always the target. They'll always look to target Scotland, probably as the most likely candidates. But we shouldn't forget what they did in the autumn. They beat South Africa. South Africa, not much cop at the moment, if we're being absolutely blunt about it. But it takes nothing away from Italy's performance. And I think what Conor O'Shea has done is just bring in a little bit of much-needed structure to allow brilliant world-class players like Sergio Parisse just to express themselves a little more, but to play in the right areas, and that's what Conor and Mike Catt are certainly talking about with them at the moment.
And finally, for France, they've recently also changed coaching setups. They probably didn't have their best time under Philippe Saint-André, under Guy Novas now. Do you think they'll be looking at players like Picamoles and Fofana to really sort of take them on now?
Yep, they're the key players, and we watched Gaël Fickou playing for Toulouse up at the Rico over the weekend. They've got such magical players who can be world quality, the best in the world one day, and then feather dusters the next day. And that's the problem with the French. If they can get some kind of consistency to go with the way they play the game, then there'll be real threats during the Six Nations. And I think that's what Guy Novas is trying to do. He's trying to bring them back to the old French way of playing, a bit of joie de vivre, playing it a little bit off the cuff and really asking questions of defences. They'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, because obviously, apart from Ireland, they probably ran the All Blacks psychosis this year.
They did, and they along with England are the team within the Northern Hemisphere that really ought to dominate year in, year out, given their resources, given the quality of players they have coming through the top 14. It's just a question of putting the ducks in place, or the cockerels in place, if you like, with the French. But if they do that properly and well coached by Guy Novas, as they will be, then you could see them going a very long way in the Six Nations.
So the opening game, France-England, how do you see that one going?
I think England will win. Because they're at home, and I think England are a very good side at the moment. I love what Eddie Jones is doing. He's given them a confidence, and the other nations don't like this. They talk all the time about arrogant England, but you earn the right to be either arrogant or confident, depending on your point of view. And I think the way England are playing under Jones, they've got good players who believe in themselves, believe in what Eddie Jones is saying. And if they're going to challenge for the World Cup, Eddie will be saying, you've got to win the Six Nations, and that'll be the first step against the French. We've talked about the threats that they will pose, but if England are serious about Six Nations and then really challenging New Zealand going forward, these are the games they have to win.
Thank you again, Nick. Back to
The Six Nations is always packed full of excitement and drama, and you know there will be plenty of twists and turns along the way. Elliot Owens went over to Gloucester to find out what you guys are looking forward to most about this year, and how the home nations will fare when the tournament kicks off at the start of February.
It will be 2 weeks on Saturday until the Six Nations gets underway. And this year's competition will be an intriguing one, as all nations involved will have plenty to show for after the autumn series. I decided to head to the rugby-rich city of Gloucester to find out what a few long-term admirers of the game believed would happen, starting at popular sports shop Hudson & Co, with Matt Williams convinced injuries will have a part to play.
Scotland, I think they might surprise a few people, and again Ireland as well. They look like they've got a really strong side as well. So, but of course these things are all hampered by injuries and things like that. You know, by the time the Six Nations, they could have lost a couple of extra players, and that makes a hell of a difference to a lot of these squads. England are probably the only ones that can swallow the losses.
I then found myself outside of Gloucester's King's Home in a popular matchday bar ran by brother of Cherry and White's legend Mike Teague, who has a different view of England's chances.
Well, I think surprise package would be Scotland. Wales, not so sure on. But I think England may struggle this time because they've lost a lot of their stars. I think it'll all go down to Ireland and England, who wins the Six Nations, or maybe the Triple Crown.
Student and barman at Teagues's, Charlie Osborne, believes that the home nations will be especially wary of the upcoming Lions tour and says Scotland will continue to rise.
I've also got to take into account the Lions as well. Lions tour, people are going to be fighting for spots and bits and pieces like that. So Actually, it could be anyone's Six Nations, but the top 3 teams are definitely Wales, England and Ireland. Scotland, in my opinion, still have a little bit more to do, a little bit further to go before they really make an impact in the Six Nations, but I'm certain they will get there.
The 2017 Six Nations campaign gets underway in early February, with Grand Slam champions England the firm favourites once more. But Ireland looks strong contenders this year after a very successful autumn series. And of course, the two meet in Dublin on March 18th in the final week, with Ireland looking to defeat England and put an end to their winning streak, as they did to the All Blacks last year. But if Eddie Jones had it his way, there'll be more of this come the end of the Six Nations. Elliot Owens, Park Life Sport.
And as we talk to them for the final time today, Carl, Nick, what do you think about the new tackling rules, the trialling of the bonus point system, and what the Lions squad might be?
Thanks again, Sean. We're back again. This time we're here to talk about the new tackle laws that came in on the 4th of January. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of it already with a few more red cards, a few more yellow cards. It's caused quite a bit of controversy over the last few weeks. What are your thoughts on them?
It's been Armageddon, hasn't it? We've not quite had the meltdown in the game that we thought we were going to have in the new year. First thing to say is I think they're a good idea, because I think anything that makes the game safer is important. And we've seen the stories around George North in particular with concussion and the danger of head injuries within the game. You've got to remember how much bigger players are these days, how much force they hit with, how much quicker they hit that force with as well. It's a really, really tough game, and I think World Rugby are absolutely right to say, listen, we don't want to lose the dynamism or the physicality of this, but we've got to make it absolutely clear that it's a game that's safe for us all to play.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, lowering people's tackling positions can only be a good thing. I mean, A, you might reduce the amount of concussions, and B, you're encouraging an offloading game, aren't you?
You are. What we're finding, certainly within the first couple of weeks, though, is that more players are being concussed as the tackler. They're going down low. We saw James Haskell being knocked out by Freddie Burns, which isn't something that you necessarily expect to see happening. But because James Haskell was naturally going down lower and he hit one of the bony bits around Freddie's hips, he was knocked out. So it's making us all rethink the way the game is played to a certain extent. And I certainly know, watching teams train during the week, that the defence coaches are working very hard on almost re-educating players how to tackle that much lower.
One people I feel very sorry for is the referees, but from what I've seen so far, they seem to be handling it very well. Saw Wayne Barnes the other night on Rugby Tonight.
Yeah, well, the referees, certainly in the Aviva Premiership, are the best in the world. And again, they're all full-time. This is their full-time job, and they have review meetings at Twickenham on Monday and Tuesday to make sure that they've got it right. They're constantly assessing their performance, talking to us as broadcasters to help them explain what they're looking to do. So when there is a red card at Newcastle on a Friday night, we can explain the thought process. So the referees, certainly in the Aviva Premiership, are the best in the world, and we have it in good hands at the moment.
I'm sure we'll see the progression of that over the coming months. If we go on to the new bonus point system that's being trialled in the Six Nations, obviously some people used to complain that the Six Nations could be quite a dull affair. Some teams are refusing to attack sometimes if they didn't need to. Do you think this will encourage more attacking rugby?
Well, that's certainly the idea, and the idea of just bringing in the bonus point system that exists in the Aviva Premiership at the moment. So 4 points for a win, extra bonus point if you score 4 or more tries, and you'll get a losing bonus point as well for finishing within 7. The idea is that it gives us the kind of attacking game that we have in the Premiership. My problem with it is that it doesn't address the fundamental challenge of the Six Nations, and that's that it's very often played in a hurricane or in a mud bath or in a rainstorm, because it's played in January and February and then March and April. So traditionally it gets better as a watch the closer we get to spring. It's not going to address the weather issue, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had to pick a winner today for the Six Nations, who is it for you?
I think it will be Ireland, simply because I think England and Ireland will be pressing towards the end of it, and that what may well be the deciding game, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, but what may well be the deciding game will be at the Aviva in Dublin, and I would just tip Ireland to beat England there.
I'd have to sort of go against you there. I'd probably go for England, just, patriotic and everything
You've
like
got
that.
your rose glasses on there, haven't you? That's the problem.
Absolutely. If we look ahead now to June, a lot of these players, which a lot of the players will be doing, the Lions tour over in New Zealand. Firstly, who is your sort of outside pick for a Lions jersey?
Crikey. Crikey. Well, Thomas Young, we talked about him. There is always 2 or 3 selections within that squad who aren't part of the list that we're drawing up in the pubs right now. There'll be somebody who comes through the Six Nations that Warren Gatland will go, hang on a minute, I'm gonna have a punt on him. What a brilliant summer it's going to be. The Lions in New Zealand is as good as it gets. It's the ultimate challenge. I think they've got a chance. I think if there's any hint of complacency in the All Black psyche, we've talked a lot about the quality of the players that the 5 home-based nations have going into the summer. If they can meld, they don't have much time to get together, but if they can blend, they can give it a real good go.
So just to finish off, for the Lions, what is your battle on the field? Is it Owen Barrett? Is it who would it be for you if you were?
Well, I think they will. I think they'll probably go with Owen Farrell at 10. I think Johnny Sexton's pushing him hard. It depends to a certain extent on the makeup of that back line, but I love the way that Farrell manages England around at the moment. And there are question marks as well about Johnny Sexton's fitness right now. So if I was a betting man, I'd go for Owen Farrell, but if you pick Johnny Sexton, it's not going to weaken the Lions in any way. And I think the series will be much closer than people are fearing it won't be at the moment.
Thank you very much for your help, Nick. We'll go back to Sam and Sean.
Carl, Nick, thanks very much for joining us this evening. As I've got a Welshman sat next to me, it'd be silly of me not to ask how you think your country's going to get on.
As the guys said, Warren Gatland's away with the Lions, and I think Rob Howley has been under Gatland for so long. I think he's sort of learned his trade and how he plays. And I think if he can motivate all the players, I think we can do well. But, you look at our autumn form, and you've got to think that we're struggling. So it could go either way, but as a Welshman, obviously I want us to do well.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for.
All that's left for us to say is enjoy the Six Nations. Goodbye.
Bye.